gave some, conditions that government is putting in place to ensure that we try and flatten the curve. Because, to put it lightly, Kenyans are behaving badly. Now, the question that we have asked this morning is, do you consider do you think that the behavior of Kenyans is contributing to the rise of the coronavirus infections? Do you think that this is happening? I'm going to be reading your comments as we go along. But let's start off with what the CS had to say. And we've had him literally frustrated time and again. But let's listen into support part of what he had to say.
And somehow, somewhere along the line, we seem to have come to the conclusion as a society that things have gone back to normal. Today's figures show things are far, far from normal. Things are very challenging. And those who are exhibiting the indiscipline that I've referred to, leading others astray, are becoming a common phenomenon. You will remember that 2 weeks ago or so, His Excellency the President de-escalated measures to do with the hotels and eateries. You have all seen for yourselves, the media, even people in the media have been calling me and telling me you can see the abuse that people are exhibiting in the eateries and in the hotels. We gave certain protocols, and clearly a lot of people are not following those protocols. Yet there are those who are assisting us. There are those who are observing these measures. There are young men and young women walking back into those places who would otherwise be at home and whose livelihood is being threatened not by the government, but by those who misbehave and then cause action to be taken across the board and across everybody else. And for today, I am still saying that there is a chance, and I ask those responsible to please adhere to the rules. There is only so far that we can go, and so many places that we can make.
And there you have it, the CS saying there's only so much that we can do, there's only so far that we can go. He has been very clear, and this is not just him, but worldwide we've seen the countries that are winning this fight are those that the residents have taken the warning seriously, are taking the precautions, and are doing what is required. So what ails us as a country that we are not doing that? That's a discussion we're going to have. Remember, we'd like to hear from you, and we are asking you to participate at Trix Ngado or at Michael G. Gitonga. But joining me via video link, we have Dr. Susan Gitau, who is a counseling psychologist from African Nazarene University. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Gitau. Let's start with that question. What is ailing us as Kenyans? Why are we not taking these precautions seriously?
Thank you very much, Martin. And you can pick the distress in our CS Health, because he knows the reality behind Kenyans not following the COVID-19 guidelines, restrictions. And I like the way he's saying that we have a part of Kenyans who are actually good, who are following rules, who are disciplined. But we do also have a group of Kenyans that are still living in denial. And from a psychological point of view, I would say this denial is going to destroy us. It's the high time we accepted that COVID-19 is here. I told you before this discussion started that I am so afraid and I fear, especially for those congested areas. I heard some people saying that you're closing business at Isili, but if you look at the people that walk and crisscross around Isili, majority of them are actually even from the neighborhood, Mathare Valley, and these people are not like the ones who are driving in their own cars. So I would like Kenyans also, as much as we are talking about, oh, don't close business, this is where we eat, we also get inside ourselves. And I think we rarely do that, because if we do a lot of mindfulness, getting inside ourselves and asking ourselves, is what I'm doing helping me in the first place? Is what I'm doing helping my family in the second place? And in the third place, am I a patriotic Kenyan? Because right now, you look at the cases that were there before, we were already struggling as a country economically, and we were trying to restrict these movements within limited areas. And there was curfew, and I thought curfew would teach us something. Apparently, we move on and forget. And I always keep asking myself, I teach multicultural counseling at African Nazarene University. And one of the things that we do is to analyze the behavior of us Africans. Could we still be living with the colonial mentality that you have to be whipped to do something? So a lot of indiscipline, I would say yes. And even for the ones who have been disciplined, it's because they have calculated, they have been proactive. And somebody just decides that I will not use more of my money, and at times there is no money that I have on my medical services because I can avoid getting into trouble. And I guess for Kenyans, one of our indisciplined rationale is that we always wait to be forced. It's very, very sad.
Okay.
And that kind of a mentality, Martin, it is
Michael, the name is
mentality.
Michael.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
But maybe just to interject a little bit there, Dr. Gitau, you've mentioned something that I think I wanted to maybe just get your view on, particularly from a psychologist's point of view. You've mentioned a colonial mentality. And we know that many times we blame government or authority for not communicating clearly. Would you say, one, that government has done a good job of communicating the need, the effects that we are likely to face if our behavior does not change? And then we get to the colonial mentality whereby we have to be forced as a nation to do things. We have to have a whip cracked, literally.
Well, I want to commend the government and especially the Ministry of Health, the frontliners, I call them, and right now every Kenyan should salute them. However, as much as they are trying very much, every day we are having updates on what is going on with COVID-19. Awesome. And that is streaming all the way from World Health Organization coming down to the national level. And we are doing well even on local radio stations. However, there are people who don't even have time to listen to the radio, to watch TV. Some of them don't have the screens. And this is where I always say, when we go to the chiefs, to the local administration, how well equipped, how well supported are they? You know, people say probably I am obsessed with Rwanda, with the Nyumba Kumi project or initiative. But in Kenya, as much as we know, if I know my neighbor is doing something wrong, I can correct them, I can help them. We are not good in monitoring our neighbors. Because if we have that Nyumba Kumi initiative working, then in every Nyumba Kumi shell, we could be having people reporting those who are not actually following the COVID-19 rules. But we do have also issues whereby the communication is very good. Ask the elite in this nation, and they are unlikely to be the ones who will be affected by COVID-19. Why? Because they are there on social media reading, they are there on TVs following, but those people in the rural setup, those people in the slums, I want to tell you, you will go there and you will ask yourself, is there COVID-19 in Kenya? Because majority of them even ask, are you sure this disease is there or is just political propaganda? So you can see the Kenyans' mind have been poisoned with the political affairs and activities that are in this country, such that even when something that is real and genuine happens, Kenyans don't believe. And so this is where I say, let communication flow from the top all the way to mashinani. And if the chiefs need support, I have one chief I like hailing from one big slum in Kiambu County. And he tries, and I tell him, call me, tell me. Like yesterday, he had issues with the youths. You have heard of this kazi mtaani or mitaani for vijana. They are called there, they don't find their names, they start congesting, congregating. Yeah, and at the end of the day, you're asking yourself, where is social distancing? Even with all the good gestures, because I believe it's a good gesture for a young person to have 600 per day. It is a good gesture because they are the ones who are not working right now in the casual labor. But at the end of the day, how is our organization? And I also want to say, people that know better, I always say the responsibility or the highest responsibility stops with you. If the president does his job, if the CS does his job, if the other people do their job, what are you doing as a Kenyan first and foremost? You who is also the local leader, community leader, what are you doing? Because even when I saw these youths yesterday, I was a bit scared, and they all congested at the DCC's office saying, my name is not there. And I was even saying, even the person trying to check whether their name is there, all of them are all over him. Tell me if one of them has COVID-19. And the saddest thing is, Kenyans should read this very clearly, that the CS has said, so that you sink it in your head, that if you have mild symptoms, you will be taken care of at home. Tell me what that means. If I were that Kenyan that knows I am vulnerable, I am most at risk, I will do the best that I can that I don't contract that COVID-19.
Okay.
I will do everything that I can to comply. So there is that part of colonial mentality, and at times it has to be done. Honestly, if the hotels were opened and then they abused that, you can see the churches are also asking, can we be allowed? We are good at keeping social distance, even at the mosque. And you have also seen at Isli what happened. So at the end of the day, I see a stressed community also.
All right, Dr. Gitau, allow me to pause you. Allow me to pause you a little bit because I want to bring in Mark Bichachi, who's a communications expert. Thank you for joining us, Mark. And question, of course, we are starting off with is, why do you think Kenyans are behaving like they're behaving? Is it that we don't understand the magnitude of COVID-19? Is it that maybe we at majority are at a position where they are debating as to whether to survive by going out to get food or COVID-19? What do you think is causing this behavior?
There are a number of issues there, my friend, because the first one is you've got to consider there are Kenyans who are considering, is hunger worse than COVID? That's part one. And there are lots of people who are now thinking, how can I get back to work and still continue to keep myself safe, so masks and things like that. But there's another category that is considering the threat of COVID not to be significant enough. This is what I mean. In Kenya today, we've got about 70 to 80% of those infected with COVID-19 being asymptomatic. And the chances of dying, because there are only about 24, 25 people who've died, people are considering, are doing the mathematics and saying, you know, the old Kenyan saying, kufa gari, kufa dereva, and they've just decided to take a risk. And this risk-taking nature is quite common in Kenyan culture. If you look at how matatus drive, if you look at how we ourselves drive, Kenyans like to take risks. But beyond that is the religious fervor that exists in certain communities in Kenya. You've got the religious fervor, for example, where I'm told certain people went to the mosque during this Ramadan period. I think 2 mosques opened up. We know an imam who, even after being discovered to be positive, went ahead and infected nearly 30 people initially. So you've got those people who've got religious fervor and they believe that the religion will keep them safe. And that also goes to the people who are asking for the churches to be opened, because one of the places we know that infections has occurred the most is within religious settings. That's in the US, in Kenya, and in many places. We can't afford to do that. So those are the 3 main reasons. But the last reason, which is also very significant, is that Kenyans have a nascent mistrust and distrust for the government. And that distrust makes them see suspicion in everything. And there are many conspiracy theories. Oh, the government just wants money, the kits are flawed. Unfortunately, that was supported by Magufuli, which is completely wrong of him to do. But it's also the distrust that Kenyans have towards their government.
Towards the government. All right, Dr. Gitau, let me bring you in on this. And we, of course, have the religious sector. And we do know that not too long ago, we had a number of religious leaders calling for the opening of churches and mosques, which government has not heeded to yet. But do you feel that this could also be another area that when we have leaders, let me just call them leaders, because we have religious, we have political, we have all those, may not be communicating how serious this disease is to a point where their followers, then it becomes difficult for them to literally believe that government is actually serious on what they're saying?
Thank you very much, Gitonga. One of the things I would like to point out is that we do have some churches that are doing very well. And you have seen it. They have started going live for their services. and they are sticking to that. Some of them are even trying to do a lot of sensitization on COVID-19. They are continuing with your job of community service, even of charity, and they have very good mechanisms of doing that. But we do have some churches, and this is whereby I say mentally, we are more of a reactive society than a responsive society. Because even for those churches and those mosques, some of them, to be very sincere, there are people who talk because they want to be oppositional. Like now, when the restaurants were opened, they were up in arms and said, why are we not opening the churches and the mosques? And that is where now the leadership has to rethink about double standards. But we do also have some who did not have very good like financial and change management structures. And they are the ones who are saying, right now, we don't know what to do with our parishioners or congregants. We don't know what to do with them. But it's time to learn. Don't take this opportunity as an opportunity to push for your agenda. You should take this opportunity as church leaders, religious leaders, faith-based leaders to actually have a plan. What if this COVID-19, with the numbers rising? The other day we were thinking it's going to be 2 months, 3 months. The numbers are rising. What does that mean? What plan do you have as a church? What plan do you have as a mosque? What plan do you have as any other faith-based organization? When we also look at Kenyans, I want to talk about the aspect of dependency, that we are so dependent on any leader who talks that we have failed to go introspect. We have failed to go inside of ourselves, that we can actually be creative. We can actually think through solutions. So at the end of the day, I want to say that psychological mentality of depending on another over my life, it's very scary. And that is where I am saying with the mental health psychosocial support structure, and I believe it's going to be rolled out, I imagine and I feel it. I know I was called for the first meeting, but I know something good could be happening at the Ministry of Health. Counselors are very good at spreading the word because their work is talking. When I talked of counseling, it's talking therapy. And they are very good at this particular moment to do psychoeducation. How many of them in this country right now are involved? Because at the end of the day, we need to relax the minds of Kenyans. I hear the echoes of many Kenyans right now who have nothing to look forward to in terms of a meal. And so you might find them define those restrictions because someone is saying, what do I quote now?
Okay. All right. Mark, question. Do we see us flattening the curve in Kenya without the government literally cracking the whip and locking us down? Do you see that happening?
To be honest, I do not envy the Ministry of Health in the task of trying to manage Kenyans to behave correctly, because number one, the role of self-governance in Kenyan society has been underplayed for very long. If you look at how we sit for exams, you literally need a police officer with a gun to ensure that we don't cheat in exams. So you can imagine that culture from class 8 all the way to adulthood. A lot of people are not social distancing. If you go to many places across Nairobi today, you will find very little social distancing, very little use of masks. And yet people will claim that Sweden opened up and gave responsibility to its citizens. But the problem is the citizens have not shown the government that they're capable of doing it. Look at the demonstrations in Mombasa of people trying to show the governor and the government that they're not going to social distance. So literally, what Kenyans are showing the government is they are unwilling to give themselves the discipline necessary for us to begin to open up. And that's why restaurants were a good experiment for the government to do, because the expectation of the government was that you would go into a restaurant, get your meal for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and get out of there. And that's easier to control. It is much harder to control people who will have a service for 2 hours, then have a car park service for another 2 hours. And we saw what was happening in Baringo at the airport. So what is going to extend these particular lockdown measures for the people is the behavior of Kenyans themselves. If we continue to behave as we have been doing and the infections keep going up, guess what? We'll have to remain locked up because the government now will have to do its constitutional mandate of protecting your life.
Your life.
Even when you don't give them permission.
All right, Daktari, let me ask you the same question. Do you see us flattening the curve unless now government comes in and says, you know what, let's just totally lock down for whatever period of time it will take? In other words, we have to have the taskmaster literally crack the whip on us.
I am seen as going there, but I would also like to say that as we crack that whip, there are other areas that we need to consider, especially the vulnerable. I hail Kenyans who have given in a very big way. I hail the government for the amount of money it has mobilized for the most vulnerable. But I do have an issue with the monitoring and evaluation systems, because I don't see why kazi vijana mitaani, the young ones should move from like 3 kilometers from where they are because of indiscipline. Youths, can you work in your own environment other than being forced by police or community leaders to work? It is money you have been given, and it is a big honor. It is a big sacrifice for Kenyans. Can the youth work without being monitored? Can you do your job? And I also want to say that Kenyans should refrain from doing something for the police. I am looking at the way people are wearing the masks. They are always down here, you know? And you ask yourself, who are you wearing that mask for? And when they see you, if you have like uniform, they think you're police or you are just another spy. And I like what my co-panelist has said, that Kenyans are having a lot of mistrust, a lot of distrust. And this is not the time to say, it's politics, it's my life, it's my health. So I would support the government if there are good mechanisms on taking care of the elderly, taking care of the children, taking care of the vulnerable. There should actually be a lockdown. Otherwise, I can't imagine, as a psychologist, the mental health services that will be required in this country post-COVID-19 trauma will be so huge. We are still struggling with post-colonial trauma. We are still struggling with post-election violence trauma. What about this COVID-19? So I think we should also make this mental health psychosocial support real. There should be counseling going down and counselors using all the means that they can to send this message, because counselors have a way of getting into the hearts of people and making them see themselves inside out. And at the end of the day, I would want to say, as Kenyans, let each one of us wake up and be responsible. Teach one each day. Sensitize one each day, wherever you are. If you see something is not right with your relatives, with your friends, with your colleagues, teach one, teach one. You know, I remember the first time that the case was announced in Kenya. We were all scared. What has happened now that we have over 500 cases? What is it with us Kenyans? What do we want?
And those numbers right now, Daktari, sorry to interrupt, those numbers right now don't seem to be scaring Kenyans enough to keep them in. But Mark, let's be fair. To be fair, what do we expect Kenyans to do? We have a good number of Kenyans who, even if you told them to stay indoors, you're actually doing them more disservice psychologically, because they have no food, they have a family looking up to them, they have kids who are not in school right now. So when they weigh the options, whether to stay home and die, it reminds me of, if you'll allow me to use the scripture, the 10 lepers. They said, we stay here, we die. We go out there, we die. Would rather die going.
Yes. Well, it's the 4 lepers.
Sorry.
Yes, no, but it is indeed between the devil and the deep blue sea for a lot of people, because a lot of people are looking at it this way. That, number one, I am a young person and the probability I will die from this thing is very low. Again, what we are seeing is the cases. We're not seeing people dropping dead on the streets. So the reality of what COVID-19 is yet to register to a lot of people. It is still for them something they're seeing on TV. But what they can see as a clear and present danger is the possibility of hunger. And for others still is the possibility, very real possibility, of your landlord kicking you out, because some of the landlords have decided not to give any form of consensus to the people. Now, the truth of the matter is that the government government is trying. Yesterday, the government released its second tranche of relief money to the second group of vulnerable people. We've talked about the youth incentives, the youth jobs. We've talked about the tax, 2% reduced VAT. But it's simply not enough. And that's not a function of the government not trying. It's a function of how poor we are as a country. And one of the things that COVID-19 gives an opportunity for us to do is we have to ask the question, is going forward, how will we handle our poor people in society? We need to move from being a handout society and now properly put a safety net for the poor so that if COVID 2020 happens, we have an opportunity to save our people. And that's really the challenge. But the government is trying. We need to encourage them to try more, and we need to reduce the conspiracy theorizing and allow ourselves for once to just follow the instructions of the government.
All right, Daktari, what do you see as a solution? What advice would you give particularly to the authorities to handle Kenyans?
I would like to ask the authorities to implement as soon as possible the mental health and psychosocial support structures, because at the end of the day, our CS cannot do it alone, the president cannot do it alone, and you can hear the silence among the politicians. So Kenyans should know this is about you, this is about your life, this is about your health. And just like my co-panelists have said, can we think about the poor? Because it will be a big shame that in Kenya, because of COVID-19, any Kenyan, any single Kenyan is going to die of hunger. And I would also want to say, can we up our game in terms of monitoring and evaluation of this relief that is being given, this charity that has been given by Kenyans who have sacrificed to see this happen? Can we have people not putting up skyscrapers with this COVID-19 money? I am one believer of reality about this life, that if you do something against your neighbor, and your neighbor is your fellow Kenyan, that money that is meant for the poor is the one you're using to enrich yourself with this COVID-19. You never know. You never know. And may we ask very serious existential questions to all of us. What am I doing right now? The media stations, you have done a marvelous job. For once, every media station at KTN, you have taken the front line. You are educating people day in, day out. You're making sure you're reaching out everywhere. You're making sure that this information is home. But who else is helping you at the grassroots level? And this is where I say our local administration, kindly, let the watchdogs do their job. When they tell you things are not happening, kindly listen. Some of the Kenyans that we have here, they don't really live for themselves, they live for others. Can we sacrifice for once that our nation will not be known that another scandal, COVID-19 scandal, because people have seen a loophole. And for the counselors in this nation, if they will never be involved at this time, because as a mental health expert, I always say prevention is better than cure. And I would tell you, mental health illnesses are the most expensive illnesses actually to cover.
Okay.
So if we can be able to help right now, and Kenyans maintain the restrictions, Kenyans exercise. Kenyans, make sure you exercise. Don't tell us you're unable to stay in the house because it's boring, because there's nothing to do. There are so many things you can do. We do have indoor games. Why? In countries where they always have winter. Right now in our homes, let us be creative. Let us ask ourselves, what can we do different as Kenyans?
All right, Daktari, I'll need to pause you there and come back for your closing comments in just a bit. But let me start with you, Mark, on closing remarks. And what you see, or rather, the communication government has been giving so far, many Kenyans will say they know what is happening. We have the numbers. We have been told what needs to be done, but that doesn't seem to be working. Does government need to change their communication strategy, and how?
Well, government does need to change their communication strategy in a few ways. Number one, I think CS Mutahi Kagwe needs to come out very clearly and tell Kenyans what he is doing to fight corruption in the ministry that he was bequeathed to hardly 2 months ago. He needs to show Kenyans that he has changed several boards, that he's removed 30 of his procurement personnel. He needs to come out, because that is one of the ways that is going to create the confidence in Kenyans that is needed. Number two, the government needs to begin to show what the exit strategy is for these measures that they have. They need to tell Kenyans, listen, if you stay in your house for the next 21 days and the number comes from 585 and begins to reduce from the 45 cases we are seeing confirmed every day, and we are seeing 10, we are seeing 5, then after 21 days, this lockdown will end. I think that will, when you give people an actual target, then it gives them the ability to persevere through what is happening. Number three, I think it is time they employed the religious leaders to begin to talk to their people about the necessity to stay home. They need to talk to the imams, they need to talk to the pastors, and they need to talk to local government to tell people, listen, stay home. It's just 21 days, we will save your life, and after your life is saved, you're going to go back to normal. But the last thing that the government needs to do, it needs to communicate very clearly that the measures they've put to support people and the measures they've put to make sure the economy has a safety net needs to be continue beyond COVID, because it's not going to recover that, bam, today we are not locked down and tomorrow we are okay. We need to assure business people especially that, guess what, even if you open a month from now, we will still give you the incentives you need for your business to continue happening. So that will be a lot more carrot and a lot less stick, and that will work for this country.
For this country. All right, Daktari, your closing remarks as we wind up.
Thank you very much. Mine is to tell Kenyans it's the high time we accepted that COVID-19 is here with us. Should you feel distressed, know that you have the very breath of life that God gave you, that if you keep breathing in and breathing out, what happens in your brain, you relax because it has enough oxygen and you can reason out your situation. The other thing I would like to tell Kenyans, analyze your situation. Where are you now? What are the challenges you're facing at this moment? What are the resources that you still have? What are your coping mechanisms at this particular moment? And if you feel you are inadequate, if you feel you're so distressed, this is where I'm calling for a number. I know there are so many numbers that have been given, but we were discussing last evening with a group of counselors on Zoom that we need a line for counselors so that that person who is distressed and could just walk out because they are not aware of the environment, they can actually have somebody to talk to. Because at this moment, the people who have other issues like mental health issues, now the situation is worse for them. Kenyans reflect on the many times we have been combated with incidences that are crisis in nature, emergency in nature, how we have worked. The same mentality that we have used to help one another, can we use the same mentality to support our government to support us?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Susan Gitau, who is a counseling psychologist from the African Nazarene University. Thank you for joining us. And Mark Bichachi, who is a communications consultant. And Kenyans, let's start behaving. And we're going to take a break.